Hello, everybody. Jamin Shively here. Welcome to this radcast on Arcology. This is just kind of one of our initial meetings on the topic that we're recording to share with you. I'm delighted to be joined by Doctress Newtopia in Tucson and Dan Bader in Chicago. Say hello and good morning, and how you guys doing today?
Very well.
Glad to be here and discuss arcologies.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, welcome to you both. This is sort of an informal come as you are discussion. So, but you know, the intention is, I'll just say this for the world that we just talked a minute ago, is, you know, the intention is this conversation, this recorded conversation will be sort of one of the foundational stones of the series that we're going to build on top of this on Arcology. And there, in that series, we'll start with a little bit of a more formal introduction, but I want it to be a brief introduction. And doctors, we can hear the machines in the background there. If you want to mute. No, you can just mute. You can just mute when you're not talking. That's all. That's all right. No problem. In the more formal introduction, where the idea is the more formal introduction. That's what you'll see when you first go to howtochangetheworld.org and you see, the series on Arcology. The very first recording would not be this one, but the one that will be kind of our more formal introduction. I'm calling it formal. It's really not formal. I'll probably still have messy hair on that one as well, but it'll be a briefer introduction where we basically say, okay, let's really hit the main points, so that someone who's just kind of cruising around on the homepage of howtochangetheworld.org, they'll be able to see, oh, Arcology, what's that? And then they'll be able to click on it. Let's let them have a 5-minute introductory video. That's kind of like the first thing that they see, not a 2-hour, 43-minute, Russian sci-fi movie marathon where they're just like, oh my God, what do I kill myself? Do I quit my job so I can watch the rest of this? Just kidding. A little bit of punchy Jamin Shively humor early in the morning, but you get the idea, right? Let's give them a 5-minute intro, right? But in a way, this is sort of preparation for that 5-minute. What do we want to cover? What do we want to cover on the series in general? And very importantly, so just like yesterday, we went from one big blender of chop suey to, hey, let's kind of, fork this out, branch this out, so that we can have more focused conversations. We can also do a reverse chop suey on the topic of Arcology itself. I like that, a reverse chop suey. And what do I mean by a reverse chop suey on the topic of Arcology itself? First of all, what do I mean by a reverse chop suey on any topic? What I mean is break it down into its subtopics, its component topics, its pillars, right? And give each one the respect that it deserves in the form of its own dedicated series, right? So, for example, so subtopics under the broader topic of Arcology might include, and I'm just going to rattle off some, and please just jump in, unmute and talk. Don't wait for me to shut up, because that may never happen. But some of the subtopics under Arcology for which we could create a separate series. And first of all, let me make a little disclaimer here. Just because I say that we could create a separate series for each of these subtopics doesn't mean that we have to, now block off 2 hours out of our life every week to, nurse and water each of those subtopics. Some of them we may do a 5-minute intro on and may not come back to it for another 3 months. And then 3 months later, we may do a half an hour, segment, or we may be super inspired and we may spend 3 hours on it, whatever. The point is, let the front door entrance and the welcome be a 5-minute introduction and welcome, not a 2-hour, 43-minute Jamin Shively-esque nightmare. Am I in the middle of a nightmare, or is Jamin really going on forever on this topic? I'm picking on myself, but we're all guilty of of loquaciousness. But that's a beautiful thing. I'm just saying, The very intro, let it be 5 minutes. Everything else we can go off as long as we want. And so just imagine we fork Arcology into, 8 different subtopics. Oh my goodness, right? Well, at some point we do 5-minute introductory videos for each of those 8. 5 times 8 is 40. It's 40 minutes of recording time. No big deal. And then that way people have organized, condensed 5-minute bite size, like the Halloween fun size. Now that we're getting into Halloween season, the fun size candy bars. I know, doctors, you're shaking your head. Anyway.
Go ahead, Jamin. Go ahead.
I'm almost done with my monologue here, but thanks, Dan. Anyway, that's the spirit of this, right? Short 5-minute intros. So we'll have one for Arcology itself, and then to the extent that we want to, we can create these other subtopics. No big deal at all. Boom. Do a 5-minute video. What could these subtopics be? One could be the architecture of Arcology. Another could be the ecology of Arcology, right? The ecosystem, species, and all that coexist and are part of it. The collective intelligence of the Arcology, right? The politics of the Arcology, the economics of the Arcology, the culture of the Arcology, right? A new living form begets a new culture. We could have another subtopic could be the virtual Arcology, right? That's a separate topic in its own right. That's not the same as Arcology. It's virtual Arcology. That's what we're doing here, Cyberville. Another could be eco-cities. But wait, Jamin, eco-cities are not Arcology. I know. I'm just saying it's such a close sibling to the topic of Arcology, we might as well throw it in there, right? Or you know what, maybe it's a separate series altogether called Eco-Cities, but we simply link to it. So we don't try to create it as a subset of Arcology. If it's not, that's up to you, doctoress. You would know best whether it's a proper subset, which I doubt, or, just a related topic. But anyway, that's another subtopic. I'll just call that for now. And then another could be utopian Arcology. Like, all right, let's take the gloves off and really envision a utopian Arcology. Let's forget practicality and, dump all the reasons why we can't do it and just talk about it. What would it look like? What would a utopian Arcology be like, right? Because we need a telos, we need an aim. So, I've just rattled off, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different possible subtopics. So just consider that in the 5-minute introduction to the topic of Arcology, where I would invite you, doctors, to give maybe a 3-minute kind of or we make it conversational or however we want to do it, but kind of give an introduction to the topic, and then say, look, here are some of the subtopics we're going to be exploring, and a couple words on each. Boom, boom, boom. Right? Welcome to the topic of Arcology. Knock yourselves out, explore some of the subtopics if some of those grab you, or just stay here on the main trunk line. The main trunk line of Arcology, right? Which could sort of be, for lack of a better word, the chop suey of Arcology, because, that's where we get together and kind of review at a high level everything. And, if we've got a synthesis from some great 2-hour and 43-minute marathon that they had on the subtopic of the economics of Arcology, fine, we provide a synthesis in this thread, the main trunk line thread of Arcology. You guys follow me? All right, I've been talking way too much. I think Dan wants to say something, and I'm sure you do too, doctor. So I'm going to go on mute and listen to what y'all have to say.
Yeah, so as you're talking about, kind of an organizational structure for Arcology, and what, someone like, my knowledge of Arcology specifically is rather limited. Whereas, Jamin, doctors, you have a base of knowledge. And one of the things I think is ultimately important is that there be some sort of a shared base of fundamental knowledge about arcology. Now that maybe that, I know Jason yesterday was talking about kind of a book club sort of format where people would read a book and then kind of discuss what the book has to offer, or maybe what the book points out are some historical difficulties in moving forward. And clearly, I see it as being really necessary to have arcologies if we get to the point where it could really be implemented. And the only thing I would say in thinking about this is that at some point, and I guess it would be under maybe the ecology subtitle, but at some point it seems like the issue of birth control, population issues are pretty fundamental, because when I think of, I remember when I think I brought up this book by James Lovelock, sort of I think it was Rough Ride to the Future. And in that book, he was, saying climate change has really moved along, and we do need to have, I think what he was kind of in a way, these arcology type communities constructed while we let the rest of the habitat, go through some sort of natural healing or stabilization. And he points out, he makes the analogy to, these social insect communities, which are able to, termite communities in the Australian desert. And so, but those kinds of ecological collectives or communities are very, very kind of programmed to survive. Like when they had, I noticed when they had the flooding from Harvey, you had these fire ant communities floating on top of the water, all intertwined and a very effective, they could survive it. And so I guess the two things I'm bringing up is just, can we find some way to have those who are participating in it, and it might be down the road, someone like myself who's very, I don't have much of a background in future studies or arcologies. Maybe, that's left to people who are more well-rounded. But I do think that there should be a base of knowledge, maybe a few books that people have read and are discussing collectively. And then again, I do think the issue of population regulation is really a critical kind of thing, because in any given arcology, my basic understanding is it would be kind of sustainable to a certain degree. It could evolve, I guess, but basically you'd have the agriculture within the arcology and other things kind of locally there. But if the population becomes too many, even if it's a well-designed, wonderful arcology, it seems like you just run into predictable problems like we have in terms of the entire planet with 7.5 billion, soon to be 9 billion. So I just wanted to throw those in there, and I'm going to go ahead and mute out and turn it over.
Yeah, population is definitely an issue because you have a container and it's designed for this many people. I think if we need a system where each woman is able to have one child for now. And there's some kind of a system that would give a license for birth. So you get a birth license in order to have a kid. And it would mean that women, of course, have to control who they're mating with. They have to be a lot more wise than they are now, at least some women. and see it as the ultimate privilege to have this child. And they're going to choose their mates a lot more carefully when they can only have one. So, I mean, that's how I look at our population. So it's the world over, each woman has one child. And of course, that's going to change the direction of what the human species is going to look like, since we have a lot more Chinese people than we do any other kind of person. But I think that's the only fair way and the only way of human rights to do it that way.
Doctors, could I just jump in and ask one question? If we have, and this is just totally theoretical, conceptual, if we have today 7.5 billion people on the planet, and somehow magically we could have everybody be living within some kind of arcology with theoretical limits in terms of how much, how much of nutritional resources, etc., could be produced. Is it, if we're thinking of not just let's say a pilot project community where you're actually let's say building a pilot project or virtually designing one and discussing it in terms of the various issues, but do we need at this point in time maybe not even everybody having one child? Do we need at this point in time, even to evolve a number of arcologies, maybe a moratorium on having births, generally speaking, for a period of time to allow a relatively quick reduction in the population that could be assimilated into arcologies?
I think that's why we need this collective intelligence, and we need access to the supercomputer to ask these kind of questions to it. How many people can we take care of? And how, what does this mean? How do we distribute the resources to take care of everybody? Seeing everyone as part of your family, I mean, that's the big conceptual change, is that we're going to take care of all the kids. All of them are going to have what they need. All of them have the opportunities to become global citizens. All of the children are going to be able to liberate their particular gift and have the resources in order to do that. And from that basis, that basic human rights basis, then we have a foundation of a new culture and a more egalitarian system than we do presently.
I really love what you just said, doctors. No, a couple things. Number one is, let's be rational about this and say, hey, how many people can we support, right? Look at it objectively as opposed to ideologically, right? Ideologically, it could be anything from, hey, God said, go forth and multiply, so that's what we're doing, screw you. Or, ideologically, we'd say, one child per woman, one, that both of those come from some sort of ideological basis. But, first, do the analysis, do the math. How many people actually can we support? And let that at least be at the table in the conversation. If not leading, then at a minimum alongside the ideological conversations. But then I also really like what inspired, what just came to mind is this idea that it takes an arcology to raise a child, right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about, I'm pretty far from being a Republican, but one of the quotes that I liked, John Kasich said during the presidential campaign, governor of Ohio, because we were talking about, hey, don't just speak up about bullying if it's happening to your kid. if you hear about or see bullying happening to any kid, he said they are all our kids, right? You know, of course, he's a politician, so he's, you know, trained to say nice things. But I actually think that really comes from his heart, and it comes from my heart too. And that's part of the cultural transformation. It's more than culture; it's spiritual. It's a spiritual transformation that we see the rest of humanity as our brothers and sisters. We're all in this together, and I think that'll be really reinforced when, you know, all the kids will be roaming around, not all of them, but, you know, you'll have groups of kids roaming around the Arcology. It's safe, right? Because there's no cars running around that can run them over. You know, we will have systematic ways of dealing with pedophilia. So, you know, so parents don't have to be, you know, hyper protective and basically have their kids locked in their rooms inside their air-conditioned McMansions in Greensboro, you know, because they're afraid some pedophile might run into them on the street. No, kids can roam around. It's safe, whether it's because we've got cameras or whether it's because there are, you know, trained, certified chaperones, you know, keeping their eye out, whatever, right? You know, that's part of what we need to work out. And that's why we're here, to work this stuff out rather than just, you know, leave it up to Paolo Soleri or whoever the male patriarch is, you know. Oh, here's the new culture. All you women come and take off your clothes in front of me if you want to get up if you want to move up in the world, right? You know, you need to work under me for a while if you want to move up in the world. Give me a break. So, you know, that's what I'm saying. Let's be really intentional about it, because if, to the extent that we don't fill in the blanks, some sociopath will, you know, for whatever Arcology they lead. That's my dystopian prediction. So, yeah.
I think that the word ideology really scares people because it's played out in human history so negatively. But if you look at basic human rights, everyone having enough food, everyone having clothes, everyone having an education, this is an ideological framework. You know, it's not one based on war, it's not one based on inequality, but it's looking at equality. Now, this scares people because then people say, oh, you're talking about communism, you know, where the individual does not have any right to move up the ladder because of this equality. I think that that would not be a problem because there's two parts of this framework. You have the democratic part where everyone is equal. Everyone needs these basic human rights, such as healthcare. Then the other part of it is the meritocracy. This is the educational system. And that educational system is one that is liberating the individual talents, genius of the person. And that makes us unique. That's the unique part. But in order for people to rise up, they need these basic human rights. So this is ultimately how a democracy should work, is you have both the meritocracy and the democracy. Democracy cannot work without meritocracy. But if you have a meritocracy is that the value is to make money and to rise up and to have your own individual, your own private wealth, your own private islands, your own private cars, then you're out of the ideology of everyone is your child. Because you don't really care about that person not having the resources that they need. Those parents are poverty stricken and they don't have the same opportunities as the rich children. So that's the change that I see, and why perhaps communism failed in the forms that we've seen it already as the Soviet Union or communist China, because they didn't have the meritocracy based on virtue and talent. And this is what Thomas Jefferson was writing about. He called it he said that what we're in now is an artificial aristocracy based on money and accumulation of wealth. this, and so the rise of Donald Trump and the rise of this whole real estate empire that we see as the foundation of a lot of wealth. So I think it's good to go back and look at the origins of capitalism and look at civilizations that were more egalitarian and learn from them.
If I could add something. So when we talk about a meritocracy, and you know, what that connotes to me is that based on a person's attributes, skills, knowledge, etc., they would be given certain slots within the society.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at various, I mean, we have a meritocracy, very flawed meritocracy in the United States right now, supposedly based on, to a large degree, intelligence. You know, just generally speaking, if you do well in school, that means you're intelligent, and then you're going to be able to make the money or have better opportunities to make money, and your status within the hierarchy will then be fair. And with communism, it kind of tore that down and tried to stress, you know, each person's skill set would contribute, and everybody, though, would get the same kind of material gain or rewards, just as long as you were contributing. And that failed. We see that capitalism, I mean, which is such a vague term, but you know, we can kind of see that has also failed. And when you look around at older kinds, you know, the religious systems, for, you know, Hinduism, for example, with the caste system, and kind of the rationale being somebody has to do the unpleasant manual labor, you know, somebody's got to do it. And therefore, those who are in the lower caste, because of their karma from a past life, are assigned it. And people are just, you know, kind of, they have sort of almost genetic, hereditary based castes for different functions. And so I do think, you know, it's really one of the questions for an arcology is how do these things get figured out given the constraints of human nature, you know, just matching resources to population, etc. So it seems like there's many constraints or problems that have to be ultimately addressed. And so I just wanted to throw that in. And
you know, these are,
Yeah.
go ahead, doctors.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, thanks. You know, a lot of thoughts are coming to mind. So like one thought is, for example, with regard to the meritocracy aspect, you know, Dan mentioned, you know, here in the United States, if you're intelligent, you do well in school, you know, then maybe, you know, you become a software engineer and then you make $1 billion or something like that. You know, you're leveraging your intelligence. And, you know, and that's a form of meritocracy. But I think we all, you know, we who've been talking about this sort of thing and exploring it and thinking about it, we see the flaws in that system. I mean, they're just so apparent. Because what we've essentially done is mashed up the concept of meritocracy with this concept of accumulation and ownership of property, ownership of land, right? You know, back in the 1800s, not that long ago, we had ownership of people. Why not, right? And so, you know, that's where I think the whole thing got perverted. And that's where I think a really interesting subtopic of arcology would be the application of cryptocurrencies within arcology, because cryptocurrencies are all about transforming value. And, you know, like we talked about in the produce example prior to this recording. But so with cryptocurrencies, you know, yeah, you can have value exchange and even to some extent accumulation. But accumulation of a cryptocurrency with which you can only buy produce. And since you can only eat so much, you end up donating your cryptocurrencies, you know, to other people in need or to family members or whatever, right? But I'm just saying there won't be like this accumulation of physical stuff, because that, as far as I'm concerned, is a crime against Mother Earth. Dividing up Mother Earth into chunks and saying this is mine and I'm going to plant monoculture on it because I can, you know, no, that's a crime against, an organized crime against Mother Earth, where the participants are Monsanto, et cetera, on and on. So that's what fundamentally needs to be overturned. And one of the beautiful things about Arcology that I love so much is that is overturned by design. There is simply no place for some billionaire to walk into Oroville and say, well, I'm going to buy up this half of Oroville. Right? Bubba, cut a check. We're closing this deal right now. And I'm going to put in popcorn machines and soda pop machines and high fructose corn syrup plant. You know, you get my point. Anyway, now that was one point I wanted to make. The other point is, I'm just observing how this conversation could easily become a chop suey of, hey, let's talk about population. Well, what that leads us to cryptocurrencies. Well, what about this? Blah, blah, blah. You know, boing, 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 boing. And that's where I want to. How did I say it? I want to do a reverse chop suey on the topic of Arcology, where, you know, we chunk it out and then, you know, let's have a focused, dedicated conversation on population control, right? And fertility and, you know, blah, 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 and all that. And then, you know, a related topic will be children in the Arcology, the raising of children. What does that look like? You know, do we indoctrinate them with I pledge allegiance to the flag and teach them to be good workers for American corporations? I don't think so. You know, well, then if not that, what? Right? You know, that all needs to be co-created. So I think we're just scratching the surface of myriad topics or subtopics and related topics to Arcology. So with that, I'm going to go on mute. What an awesome conversation.
Well, as far as this local currency idea and having an electronic currency, I'm all for that, except that some things are invisible that we trade, or they are devalued in society, like childcare. And in a really functioning economy, it accounts for all these different things, which in a capitalist society, it doesn't account for. So particularly women's work in a capitalist society that we live in is devalued. It's not even acknowledged. Housework, taking care of the elderly. These jobs are just part of the patriarchal structure. So in an accounting system that really works, all these different jobs, whether you're doing an artwork, that's counted for. Whether you're helping your neighbor, that's accounted for. And it is given the acknowledgement that it deserves, finally. So in this accounting system, there's a community in Virginia called Twin Oaks, and it's an egalitarian community, and they have such an accounting system there. So that's one example of this accounting for the various jobs that people do that modern society doesn't account for is actually happening. So looking at these sorts of egalitarian communities, such as Twin Oaks, and there's a few other examples like that in the United States, is one way to look at that.
You know, I'm really glad you brought that up about, you know, about the value of childcare, the value of doing artwork, the value of helping your neighbor. This all has value, but in our current capitalist system, that value is often swept under the rug and just said, oh, that doesn't count, you know, because of course, you know, this woman's going to take care of children, right? Why should she be paid for that? Now, what I want to make clear is when I say cryptocurrency, here's what I don't mean. What I don't mean when I say cryptocurrency is the US dollar, the same concept of money in this capitalistic system, but instead of being paper, it's now digital. And that's the only difference. And now we can accumulate all we want and buy whatever we want with this new digital currency. I want to be clear. That is not what I mean. What I do mean is exactly the kinds of scenarios you're talking about, Doctress, where we do value and account for everyone's contributions, right? Even if the normal capitalist system does not count them, we do. And so I gave the produce example, the permaculture produce cryptocurrency as an example. We could even call it, permacoin for permaculture, produced produce, where, in today's capitalist society, you just kind of give it away maybe. And, there's no way to it'd be kind of, it just wouldn't seem right to give a bushel to your neighbor and then say, hey, can you give me $5 for that? So we don't do it. But with cryptocurrency, we could have permacoin, where it's like, hey, you give away a few bushels, you get some of this cryptocurrency, which can be used for that, or for, for buying other produce, or for even maybe getting help with your backyard or help with whatever, right? So the whole idea of cryptocurrency, the big idea, not the small idea. There's a lot of small ideas around cryptocurrency, which is basically use digital instead of dollars, but still have the same capitalist paradigm. Those are small ideas around cryptocurrency. The really big ideas around cryptocurrency map to exactly what you were talking about, Doctors. Going on mute.
So the cryptocurrency is something which could be theoretically used to have an exchange where, as you say, produce, certain types of labor, certain types of altruism are getting rewarded, incentivized. And so the incentive system, and clearly it would have to be a disincentive system also, I think is an important thing to kind of think about. And there's a whole history, of course, of incentives and disincentives that human nature can respond to. And of course, the capitalist system, which we're all in, the capitalist system and the industrial manifestation, that's a big issue there, where the idea is the free market and that kind of an exchange system is really good in terms of personal freedom. We don't have a caste system like India did, or maybe still does to a degree, or a slavery system, which we had here in the United States and other places all over the world, and you still do to a certain extent. So cryptocurrency would also, Jamin, and you would know this much better than I would. I'm thinking that it would also put a constraint on, the kind of financial manipulation that, of course, the capitalist system has evolved to at this point in time. Where you have, the Federal Reserve and these other national banks essentially creating currency and then distributing it to their own advantage, to the advantage of people who have influence. So I guess it sounds like cryptocurrency is an essential component, at least today, in order to constrain the evils of our current currency financial system. I'm going to mute out.
I'm glad you brought that up about the incentive system, because that's a real debatable topic. In our present system, people do not want to give people money like welfare or, you know, a universal basic income, because they say, oh, it would just kill the incentive program. These people will do nothing. They'll just be lazy. They won't do anything. And so you have to have this money system in order to get people working and doing something constructive for humanity. I don't really think that. If you give people the opportunities to be educated and to liberate the person inside themselves, I think that's the real incentive, is within the self, and to find who you are. If you have the resources, you're able to do that. If you have the time, you're able to do that. And that's what I see Arcology doing, is to allow people to find who they really are, what is the best way that they can serve humanity, and go for that. Then you are self-directed. It's a self-direction. And you don't need money as the carrot to lead you to being who you are. So at least for me personally, that's what motivates me. It's not the carrot of money out there floating that I'm supposed to be moving towards. So in this system, I think it is one's birthright to have an account set up as soon as you're born. Look at this, you've got this certain amount of wealth because it's your birthright. And that's your minimum. That's the starting point of this accounting of who you are. There are people that are more creative than other people, and we can see that in our system. That's why this whole entrepreneur capitalism has emerged. And what people feel is so dangerous about communism is it doesn't allow for individuals to be entrepreneurs in this way. You're not supposed to rise above the common denominator. And I think that there needs to be room for that. The creative geniuses of our culture who have ideas of how to make things work. And yes, they need to be in leadership positions as well. However, there needs to be a maximum wage, so they are not able to own everything and rule everything. I think in the meritocracy, when you have these creative people at the top leading our future in the position as futurist, and analyzing all of the different factors, if we go this direction, if we go into genetic engineering, what is it going to do? And having this code of ethics that these people are going to be the ones that are looking at the whole perspective and doing what is best for humanity. Perhaps we will have a way that our meritocracy actually liberates us, which it should be doing now.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Dan. I just want to make a couple quick comments. Love everything we're talking about. One idea would be, for example, at the beginning of every calendar year, however we define the end of the year, it doesn't necessarily have to be January 1st, but at the beginning of each, year-long period, all the cryptocurrencies get erased. Nobody owns anything, so there's no hoarding. Now, and then each year the clock resets, and basically whatever you accumulate in whatever cryptocurrencies, you have to deploy during that year or use it or lose it, right? And so that'll create the gift economy and also a form of meritocracy. Like, let's say, for example, I would just love to spend 2 hours with Noam Chomsky, right? Getting his feedback on this, that, or the other. Now, he could perfectly well say, well, my rate is, 50 thought coins per hour. Whereas, you know, maybe some 12-year-old kid who's just passionate about whatever maybe earns 1 thought coin per hour, right? Because he doesn't have the, you know, accumulated experience, knowledge, network, etc. of a Noam Chomsky. And so maybe that kid works extra hard and saves up and then has half an hour with Noam Chomsky, where he has Noam Chomsky's undivided attention for half an hour because he's paying Noam Chomsky so many coins, and, you know, gets a lot of great feedback and recommendations and whatever. Okay, great. Then what does Noam Chomsky do with all these coins? Well, he may, in turn, you know, use those to get some face time with some people that he's been dying to get face time with, right? And now he's got, you know, a bunch of coin to throw at the problem. You know, that's one way to do what we kind of have other mechanisms for figuring out. But just imagine that this whole notion of wealth is completely transformed in this utopian arcology that we're discussing here, where it's no longer about accumulation of anything material, but the real wealth is your network, who you talk with, who you know, who is incubating those ideas that you planted the seeds for 7 weeks ago, right? Are those really taking off? It's leaving your mark in a positive way, making positive contributions that then last for all time potentially, because, you know, we're recording this stuff. We're in the new digital age. And so it's a complete, utter transformation of human values from I am what I own to I am what I contribute. Going on mute. Go ahead, Dan, if you wanted to.
So again, as I listen to everything, I because of my background and you know, set of interests, I just keep, you know, thinking human nature, you know, which can be argued in from different points of view what it actually is, but any arcology that we end up evolving or somebody evolves and actually gets implemented has to take into account the real constraints and potential, you know, evolution, but definitely the constraints of human nature. Because I'm, you know, as I listen to, you know, to me, I don't think people really need, you know, money and hoarding as an incentive. I really don't think that's necessary. I think that people have to receive respect. You know, everybody, I mean, the way we're constructed, it seems as if we really crave respect from other human beings, and we don't want to receive disrespect or contempt. And so I think that, you know, if you look at, I know that when the anthropologists discuss more primitive tribal living situations, you see that necessity in those situations, it requires the distribution of resources in a fair way, because everybody needs nutrition to survive, or they're going to just pass away, and the tribe will not be able to exist without everybody alive, healthy, and contributing. So you do tend to see some very strict regulations on the sharing of resources. If one hunter goes out and makes a kill and then tries to sequester away the meat from the others, and they discover that, that individual will be censored in a very, very serious way. You have to share. You know, when you go out hunting, maybe you're successful today, maybe tomorrow you'll be needing resources from someone else. We must share our resources, keep everybody healthy, viable. And that, but in those cultures, you still have human nature problems where you have dominance issues and you know, some bullying and et cetera, et cetera. But I do think the basic part of human nature understands that it's a good thing to share. You know, it's really a good thing to be able to share resources so that everybody remains viable who's a part of the community. And it also seems as if giving respect to other people could be incentivized in various ways. You know, just simply giving people a chance to evolve their potential and make a contribution. And if somebody, let's say, isn't able to do as well as someone else who's blessed with more creativity or certain kind of capacities, that's just understood. We're grateful that this person is there, you know, contributing to us, and I'm going to do what I can, but I still want to be respected, just like that other person, you know, on a basic level. I'll mute out now.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Doctor.
I was just going to say that I read this book once. It was called The Ideal Soviet City. In that book, it had a meritocracy, you know, also had a democracy. And the way that people's unique gifts were acknowledged was by power. So within an arcology, that's how I see it, is that, you know, you exhibit your gift, you get a certain amount of power, social power, you know, to be able to do this project or that project, or, you know, be a head of a laboratory or whatever it is. So, you know, that's what meritocracy is. It's certain people are able to, because of their gifts, rise up in power. And it's not a thing of like gaining wealth, at least in this ideal Soviet city. It was power. And I think that's really what it's all about, is a system of power distribution. And within an arcology, we could set up a electronic voting system to see how people react to certain projects. You know, does the public want it? You know, is this going to help the larger body? And also, Buckminster Fuller talked about these sensors. This was really before the technology of his time, but there are sensors in these communications or satellites that could be able to detect subtle energies in humans. So if the meritocracy class starts making decisions that make people unhappy, then it could be changed in order to make people more happy. So that would be a feedback system. And you need a feedback system. And this is also, you know, artificial intelligence making some of that feedback. Because sometimes the people just, they don't, at least right now, I mean, Thomas Jefferson believed that we could not have a functioning democracy without an educated people. Well, in order to be educated, you've got to have a lot of time, leisure time, to be able to read about the certain particular issues that are being voted on. And right now, most people do not have that kind of time. And they're under such stress that they really cannot look at the issues. And the issues require, like genetic engineering, a basic understanding of what genetics is.
Really good points, Doctoress. I don't mean to cut you off if you're in the middle.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, that, you know, basic human needs are basic human rights in an arcology, in an ideal arcology. Food, water, shelter, there's no question. Whether you work or not, you're a member, boom, you know, and then that way, you know, if somebody is depressed for a couple of months, right? And there's certainly a lot to get depressed about these days. Let's face it. You know, ideal arcologies or not, you know, most of the world is dying right now. And so, you know, hypothetically, if someone is depressed and they're just, you know, really not feeling it, you know, they shouldn't be punished. They shouldn't be starved. They shouldn't be homeless because they're depressed. Basic human needs are basic human rights, period. Now, I think what you said about power and influence is very profound. You know, I mentioned Noam Chomsky as an example. You know, if Dan were to send me some 20-minute video of Noam Chomsky that was just released and said, Jamie, you should check this out, odds are I'm going to make time tonight and watch it. That's influence. That's power. Now, did I pay Noam Chomsky some cryptocurrency for the privilege of watching his video? No. His power comes from his own hard work and his own creativity, and that's why people listen to him. And so I think this influence, so let's say there's voting on a certain topic, everyone, one person, one vote. But, you know, I'm a lot more likely to watch Noam Chomsky's 5-minute video on why he thinks we should vote a certain way than, you know, the guy or gal on the street who I don't know. And so that's one way of, you know, Noam Chomsky in this Arcology. Let's take an extreme. It's an Arcology with no currency whatsoever. And people simply accumulate influence or power or likability or whatever by their works, by their contributions, by the strength of their ideas, by how much, you know, work they do, whatever. Maybe there's currency for some things, not for others. I don't know. But what I'm saying is it's not at all about accumulation. I really like this. I'm intrigued by this ideal Soviet city concept. So, man, this is so exciting. So many great topics. And you see how we just jumped into the topic of Arcology, and now all this stuff is just popping up. It's like popcorn. And so then, you know, I'm feeling, you know, a certain desire to do a reverse chop suey, but really not so much because, you know, this is, I just feel this is very productive where we are right now, just kind of, you know, exploring all these related topics: democracy, power, accumulation, currency, you know, basic human rights, meritocracy. What if someone's depressed and they don't feel like working? You know, is that okay? You know, we're grappling with some pretty fundamental questions here.
Yeah, and jumping in on that issue of depression, I think that generally speaking, it is possible to have almost everybody kind of immune from getting into a depressed state. But that's another set of issues. But I do think it's possible. And I also feel that, you know, this is something which is necessary, Arcologies at this point in time, because, you know, I know we all agree with it. But the thing is, I think a lot of people feel that when you try to discuss something like an Arcology, some future, they might say utopian, you know, kind of city or place, that takes on, you know, again, if there's a connotation of, yeah, that would be wonderful, but we really don't need it. You know, it's kind of, yeah, everybody has a utopian idea, etc. That's your imagination, your fantasies. But I think at this point in time, an Arcology or a set of Arcologies, depending on, I guess, different environmental circumstances and populations, but I think it's necessary, you know, to argue that, again, because climate change, whether we have many years ahead of us to evolve or develop things or not, climate change is kind of forcing the human species into having to make a change in order to survive. And I think that somebody or some group at some point would need to market that. And I think of you, Jamin, whenever I think of marketing, you know, because you're so damn good at it, really. But you know, to be able to make the argument that, we're trying to find answers. We all need to collaborate to get some answers, but we really need this very soon. Otherwise, you know, we're going to be left to the forces of nature and the way they're kind of mounting right now, it's not going to be any good. So I just wanted to throw that in. I'm going to mute out.
I would like to add, I think it's Apple is building a new building, new headquarters. I've seen some images of it, and I read something yesterday that said that it was inspired by Jacques Fresco's design. And it's like imaged after a spaceship. So one step more. I mean, they're almost there at an Arcology level, but they're not bringing, I don't know, I haven't seen the plans, but if you bring in the residency within that spaceship, then you actually have an Arcology. You're bringing together work-live space. And that is one of the principles of Arcology, is that it's the work-live space together. It's the child care center within the workspace. And it is the agricultural place as well. So, I mean, just bringing that out, that we're almost there as far as these big corporations and these headquarters that they're building. One step more, and they would be building something that is much more like an Arcology. One person that Solari inspired was, what was his name? He's an architect, and he is the one that invented the shopping mall, the air-conditioned container that we walk around in. One step more of the shopping mall. Now, that's not the culture that I'm advocating at all, or Solari was advocating, but one step more, having people live in the shopping mall, and you have the Arcology model. No cars, pedestrian. So we're almost there. We can see how society is moving in this direction. But to do it on a basis that is totally conscious, and that we're working with the principles of basic human rights and not promoting a shopaholic culture, that is the big revolution, the cultural revolution, the love-olution, where love is really the power. And when you talked about Chomsky and influence, that is exactly what needs to drive the economy of the future, is one's inner power, liberating what's inside so that becomes the basis of your personal economy and being able to get paid or accounted for what you love, which isn't happening now. It certainly has not happened in my life. I think I'm just outside the economy. And with my gifts and talents.
Yeah, and what comes to mind, I remember, it's interesting. In some ways, at this point in my life, kind of, not because of climate change, just because of the aging process. I'll sometimes joke with people. Sometimes I get together with some guys who I was friends with, back in high school or early adulthood, and kind of joke, we're all dead men walking right now, kind of thing. But in some ways, being free, right? Because I'm retired, and being free from the authoritarian, bureaucratic workplace that I spent most of my time in working, is very, very liberating to be freed from that. And so at this point, and and I'm able to do things pro bono. I feel really great about I don't need money. Thank God at this point, and I can go out and do my presentations and do things in the community pro bono. But when I look back, when I was young, the time that was most, in a way, most enjoyable to me was when I was in graduate school. One of the graduate schools I went to at the University of Connecticut in Storrs. And I was in a graduate program there in psychology. And we were living, at that time, I was married, we had a young child, and we were living in this married student housing complex. They were just kind of like these little 2-story row houses, and everybody in that community was living in exactly the same kind of structure. We were all similar status, mostly graduate students, or there was some faculty living there. And it was just so pleasant. You really felt good. You got to know people. You had conversations. We'd do things, community things together. It just felt so really good. I remember when I had to, and it was kind of located, if you know that area of Connecticut. It was kind of it's rural, and it was when I had to leave. I mean, it just I'm not going to say it was really heartbreaking, but it really felt like a great loss. And then to move on to that, to the alienated urban city of Chicago. So I do think that people could really enjoy and feel good about an arcology community. Where again, where you have a certain kind of equality. Everybody feels good about contributing. As I say it's starting to sound utopian, but I think it could be forged into a reality.
Totally. I think, your experience there is spot on. I also think back to like my freshman year in college, when I was in a dormitory, and, similar situation there, and, nobody's married, but, we all live in very much the same kind of structure. We all eat the same food, communal dining, and let's face it, it felt fucking wonderful. Pardon my French, but it felt so wonderful compared to this whole, outdoing the Joneses, get the hell off my property, boy, and, trying to outdo each other by building a bigger McMansion with a bigger swimming pool and a bigger boat in the bigger driveway. And it's on and on and on. That's what's killing us. It's literally killing us. And what the Arcology model is going to be so much more fun, so much more satisfying. And, you talk about, giving pro bono talks and everything like that. Let's face it, the economy of the Arcology is not going to be about producing stuff, right? For one thing, there's no place to put all that stuff in an Arcology. You've got your room, you've got your little closet, you've got whatever, maybe you've got a warm coat for the winter and a lighter one for the whatever. And, that's it. Life is not about stuff anymore. It's about this kind of interaction, face-to-face interaction, whether we're having a brainstorming meeting and constructing some new idea, or a yoga class, right? Where a very competent leader, when a competent yoga leader is just saying, all right, I want everyone to just take a deep breath. You can't fake that. That's real talent and accumulated knowledge and wisdom and skill. And, and those yoga teachers will get a lot of, a perfect example. They'll get a bunch of cryptocurrency. If there's 50 people in the class, they'll get, a few cryptocurrency coins from each. It all adds up. And now, wow, now they can go off and take some other class that they want, which might be a more intensive, Noam Chomsky, small group of 8 people. and maybe they spend, you know, half the coins that they made in the last yoga class to be able to be in this. You know, I'm just saying, it's not about physical stuff anymore. It's about how we spend our time with other people, sharing and contributing. Now, will there be physical things to do? Of course. Somebody has to run the community cafe, and somebody has to wash the dishes, bust the tables, and somebody needs to do the greenhouse agriculture and all that. So hey, if that's your calling, if you love to work with your hands in the soil, I want to work a few hours a week with my hands in the soil. I want to do that because it'll be fun. So people will be able to do their heart's desire, and it's no longer about accumulating physical stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why this virtual arcology that we're creating right here, right now, by us coming together, spending time together, sharing, connecting, we're living the virtual arcology, because what we're doing right here, there's no currency being traded, and we're not making or destroying physical stuff, right? We're just sharing. We're sharing with each other, and it's wonderful. Going on mute.
Yeah, as far as work at Arcology, I was in this program. It was called the Paradox Program. So Larry devised the program because he wanted to attract the .com people. It was during that time when you had a lot of people making money on the internet. And that's who he wanted to attract, the billionaire who would then support his idea and be able to build the thing. So he started this program. Well, there were two people that began the program. I was one of those people. And I certainly wasn't the billionaire. So that was number one disappointment with me being there. But so Larry felt that with our program, that it wasn't just all working on the computer, which that's what we did, but it was also half the day working in another job, physical job, or something to contribute to the running of Arcology. So, I mean, for my job, I spent half the day, or it wasn't even half a day, maybe a couple of hours in the garden. And I did some childcare, but you know, that was really good, because if you just sit at a computer all day, you're going to have physical problems. You know, it's not healthy. And everyone should be able to have their couple of hours on the computer. You know, so it just can't be a privilege for certain people. So I think that's also something to think about, is how these jobs, like half the day, you know, working in cyberspace, half the day with your local community is the way to do it. So we have this global connection, like we're doing right now in all different parts of the United States, and then the local, which I'm about to get off this call and go and, you know, do something local and connect with people locally. So I think, you know, that's a good way to look at the new global economy, is working part-time on the internet, part-time locally. And there has to be this correlation between the two.
Awesome. 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 Great stuff. Well, look, I know you need to get going pretty soon. Doctoress, I don't know how soon. I need to get going pretty soon, like within the next half hour. Yeah, Dan's giving me a thumbs up. So here's what I propose. I think this has been an awesome, really freaking awesome kind of foundational conversation for what we're building. You know, we got some chop suey in there. So be it. That's part of the nature of a foundational conversation. Now what I'd like to propose is that we end this recording, start a new hangout, you know, take a 5-minute break or whatever works for y'all, and then start a new broadcast. And when we're ready, after a little bit of prep, we record, and then that'll be we'll record for 5 minutes and we'll cap it at 5. I'd like to go through kind of, you know, the main sort of subtopics. But anyway, but what do you guys think about that idea?
I'm for it now.
Pardon me? Doctors?
Yeah, you're talking about this ending this one presently, right?
Correct. Ending this one and then taking a 5-minute break or whatever works for everyone. If you need longer, just say so. And then we start a new one.
Okay.
After that break.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording now. I want to thank you all for your awesome participation, and thanks everyone for watching, whoever watches this. And any last words, Dan or Doctors, before we end this recording? And Dan, you're muted. I don't know if that's intentional.
No, I'm good. Sounds like a good way of proceeding here.
Okay, great. Doctors? Okay, awesome. All right, well, we'll see you on the next recording. I'm just going to stop recording now. Thank you all again.